The ranger, Creed says, "Readily will I display the intestinal fortitude required to fight on to the ranger objective and complete the mission, though I be the lone survivor." I've lived by those words for 15 years. But in October 2001, during what should have been a routine training exercise in Olympic National Forest, I learned something that broke me. There are things in this world that don't care about your training, your weapons, or your fortitude. Things that have been perfecting the art of hunting since before humans learned to make fire. And when you encounter them in their territory, survival isn't about completing the mission. It's about accepting that you were never the hunter. You were always the prey. My name is Staff Sergeant David Reynolds, and this is my confession. It was October 15th, 2001, just over a month since the towers fell. The entire military was still reeling, still processing what had happened, still preparing for what we all knew was coming: war. Afghanistan was already being discussed in every briefing room at Joint Base Lewis McChord. We were going to be fighting in mountains, in terrain where the enemy had every advantage: local knowledge, elevation, familiarity with the land. That's why Colonel Briggs authorized the exercise in Olympic National Forest. "You need to teach these boys how to fight in mountains," he'd said, jabbing his finger at the topographical map spread across his desk. "Taliban knows those Afghan peaks like the back of their hands. Our rangers need to know mountains just as well." I was 38 years old then, a 15-year veteran who'd seen action in Desert Storm and done training rotations in every hellhole the Army could find. I was one of the senior ranger instructors at Lewis McChord, the guy they called when they needed someone to run the hard exercises, the ones that broke soldiers down before building them back up. This exercise was supposed to be straightforward: 5 days, 23 soldiers, 50 miles of mountain terrain, navigation, survival, small unit tactics, cold weather operations, the kind of training I'd run 100 times before in a dozen different locations. Olympic National Forest was perfect for it: dense, old-growth forest, steep elevations, unpredictable weather, and remote enough that we wouldn't have civilian interference. The nearest logging road was 15 miles from our planned route, perfect isolation for molding soldiers. I should have paid more attention to why that isolation existed. We inserted at 0600 hours on October 15th, 4 Blackhawks dropping us at different points in the forest. My chalk, 8 soldiers plus myself, landed at the northern insertion point, about 40 miles southwest of Port Angeles. The moment I stepped off that helicopter into the pre-dawn darkness, something felt wrong. It wasn't anything I could articulate, just a feeling, the kind you develop after enough time in combat zones, where your lizard brain learns to recognize danger before your conscious mind catches up. The forest was too quiet. No birds calling, no squirrels chittering in the branches, nothing but the sound of helicopter rotors fading into the distance and the slight rustle of wind through ancient Douglas firs. "Staff Sergeant?" Private First Class Marcus Webb was looking at me, his face still showing that mixture of excitement and nerves that marked soldiers who hadn't seen real combat yet. "What's our heading?" I pushed the feeling aside. Probably just pre-mission jitters, the same anxiety I always felt when taking soldiers into the field. "South-southwest," I said, checking my compass. "We've got 12 miles to the first checkpoint. Let's move out." My chalk was a good mix: 3 combat veterans, 5 soldiers fresh from Ranger School. Webb was the youngest at 22, a kid from Iowa who'd joined up right after 9/11, motivated by the same patriotic fury that had enlistment offices swamped across the country. Then there was Specialist Tony Martinez, a sniper with 2 years under his belt, and Corporal Jennifer Hayes, one of the first women to make it through Ranger School and eager to prove she belonged. We moved in standard formation through the forest, maintaining tactical spacing, communicating with hand signals. The terrain was challenging. Steep hills, dense undergrowth, massive fallen logs that required detours. But it was exactly what we wanted. This kind of movement would wear these soldiers down, test their endurance, prepare them for the Afghan mountains. By 1400 hours, we'd covered 8 miles and were ahead of schedule. I called for a 15-minute break at the edge of a small creek. The soldiers dropped their packs gratefully, refilling canteens, checking their feet for hot spots that might become blisters. That's when Martinez approached me, his expression troubled. "Staff Sergeant, you notice anything weird about these woods?" "Define weird, Specialist." He gestured around us. "No wildlife. I've been watching for game sign the whole march. No scat, no tracks, no birds, nothing. It's like every animal in this forest just left." I'd been thinking the same thing but hadn't wanted to voice it. "Environmental factors," I said, trying to convince myself as much as him. "Maybe a wildfire came through recently, disrupted the ecosystem." "There's no burn scarring," Martinez said. "And Staff Sergeant?" I grew up hunting in Montana. I know what a forest is supposed to sound like. This isn't it. Before I could respond, Hayes called out from downstream. "Staff Sergeant Reynolds, you need to see this." We found her standing at the creek's edge, staring at something on the opposite bank. Even from 20 feet away, I could see what had caught her attention. A deer carcass, or what was left of one. I waded across the shallow creek, Hayes following. The deer had been a young buck, maybe 2 years old. It was completely torn apart. Not eaten, torn apart. The bones were snapped and scattered, the hide shredded, organs spread across 10 feet of forest floor. Whatever had done this had done it with deliberate violence, not hunger. "Bear?" Hayes asked, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. I knelt down, examining the carcass. The kill was recent. Maybe a day old, no more than 2. But nothing added up. Bears killed to eat. This looked like killing for the sake of killing, and the pattern of the injuries was wrong. Multiple attack angles, coordinated damage, like several predators working together. "Could be a pack of cougars," I said, standing up. "Or feral dogs. Either way, we need to be alert. Double watch tonight." We moved on, but the mood had shifted. The soldiers were quieter now, more nervous, checking their surroundings constantly. Even the veterans were on edge. Combat veterans develop good instincts, and every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong with this forest. We reached our first checkpoint at 17:30 hours, a small clearing about 3 miles from where we'd found the deer. I established our perimeter, set the watch rotation, and checked in with the other 3 chalks via radio. "Chalk 2, this is Chalk 1, radio check over." Static, then, "Chalk 1, this is Chalk 2. We copy. Over." That was Sergeant First Class Patricia Morrison, another instructor I'd worked with for years. Her chalk was about 8 miles south of our position. "Chalk 2, what's your status?" "Green across the board. Made checkpoint with no issues. How copy?" "Good copy." "Any unusual wildlife activity in your AO?" A pause. "Negative. Actually, Staff Sergeant, we haven't seen any wildlife at all." It's strange. So it wasn't just our area. Whatever was keeping the animals away covered a large section of forest. That should have been my first real warning, but I was too focused on the mission, too confident in my training and experience to see what was obvious in hindsight. We'd walked into something's hunting ground, and it had been watching us since the moment we arrived. That first night was uneventful, at least on the surface. I took the 0200 to 0400 watch with Martinez, both of us sitting at the edge of our perimeter, night vision goggles turning the forest into a green-tinted alien landscape. "You hear that?" Martinez whispered around 0300. I listened. At first, nothing but the wind. Then I caught it. A sound like wood knocking against wood. Rhythmic, deliberate. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more knocks. It came from somewhere south of our position, maybe 300 yards out. Could be a woodpecker, I said, though I'd never heard a woodpecker operate at 3 a.m. That's not a woodpecker, Martinez said flatly. That's a signal. Something's communicating. We listened for another 10 minutes, but the knocking didn't repeat. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just dead branches rubbing together in the wind, sent Martinez to wake his relief, and tried to get some sleep. I dreamed of being watched, of eyes in the darkness, studying me, learning me. Day 2 started at 0530 with a cold breakfast of MRES and instant coffee heated over tiny fuel tablets. The soldiers were quiet, everyone feeling the weight of the strange atmosphere in the forest. We broke camp at 0630 and moved out toward Checkpoint 2, another 15 miles south. The forest grew denser as we climbed in elevation. The old-growth trees here were massive. Douglas firs and western red cedars that had been growing for centuries, their trunks so wide that 3 men couldn't have wrapped their arms around them. The canopy was so thick that even at midday, it felt like dusk under the trees. At 1100 hours, we came across the first sign that we weren't alone. It was a marker, a structure built from branches and rocks, standing about 6 feet tall, deliberately constructed. The branches were fresh, broken recently, arranged in a pattern that looked almost like a human figure. At the base were 3 large stones in a triangular arrangement. "The hell is that?" Webb asked, his voice tight. "Trail marker," I said, though I didn't believe it. Hikers sometimes built cairns to mark trails, but this was different. This felt purposeful, territorial, like a no trespassing sign written in a language I didn't understand. "Should we report it?" Hayes asked. "No point," I said. "Could be from a previous hiking group." "We need to maintain radio silence unless it's an emergency." That was standard protocol for training exercises. Minimize radio chatter to simulate operating in hostile territory. I should have broken protocol, should have reported it immediately, called for extraction, gotten my soldiers out of there. But I was too proud, too invested in the idea that I was in control, that nothing in these woods could threaten a ranger instructor with 15 years of experience. We moved on. That afternoon, we found more markers. They appeared every mile or so, each one slightly different but clearly part of a pattern. And always, they were positioned where they'd be clearly visible from our route, like someone had predicted our path and marked it deliberately. "Staff Sergeant," Martinez said during our 1500 break, "I think we're being herded." "Explain." He pulled out his map and marked the locations where we'd found the structures. When connected, they formed a line that was guiding us southwest, away from our planned route toward Checkpoint 2. "These aren't random," he said. "Something is steering us. And I think we should alter our heading, break pattern, show we're not following their plan." Part of me agreed with him, but changing route meant deviating from the exercise parameters, meant admitting that something in these woods had rattled me enough to abandon the mission plan. "We maintain heading," I said, "but everyone stays sharp. Double interval between soldiers. Martinez, you've got point. Watch for ambush positions." If I could go back, if I could make one different decision, it would be that one. I should have listened to Martinez, should have trusted his instincts over my ego. We made Checkpoint 2 at 1830 hours, later than planned because of the rough terrain. I established perimeter, set watch, and tried to raise the other chalks on the radio. "All chalks, this is chalk 1, radio check over." Static. "All chalks, this is chalk 1, radio check over." More static, then fragments of a transmission. Chalk 3. Contact. Something in the signal cut out. I tried for 10 minutes to re-establish communication but got nothing but static and occasional fragments. Could be atmospheric interference, could be the terrain blocking radio signals, or it could be something else. I gathered my soldiers around me. Listen up, we're experiencing communication issues. Could be equipment failure, could be terrain. Either way, we're going to assume we're on our own until we link up with the other chalks at the final extraction point. What about the fragments we heard? Webb asked. That sounded like someone in trouble. Could be part of the exercise, I said, though I didn't believe it. Training scenarios sometimes include simulated distress calls to test response protocols. We proceed with the mission, but from now on, weapons condition 1, locked and loaded. That got their attention. Training exercises were normally run with weapons unloaded, ammunition secured. Going to condition 1 meant I thought there was a real threat. The soldiers loaded their rifles in silence. Night came fast in the thick forest. By 1900 hours, it was full dark, and we huddled around our tiny fuel tablets for what little warmth they provided. I set a 3-person watch, 2 on perimeter, 1 as a roving guard, and tried to eat, though I had no appetite. At 21:45 hours, we heard the screaming. It came from the east, maybe a mile away, echoing through the forest. A man's voice, high and panicked, shouting words I couldn't make out. Then more voices shouting orders, the unmistakable sound of soldiers under attack. Chalk 3, Martinez said, his face pale. That's Chalk 3's position. I grabbed the radio. Chalk 3, this is Chalk 1, report your status, over. Nothing but static and those distant screams. We have to help them, Webb said, already standing, checking his rifle. Every instinct told me to move, to run toward those screams, to do what Rangers do, never leave a comrade behind. But another instinct, one I'd learned to trust in combat, was screaming at me to stay put, that this was a trap. The screaming stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse. Staff Sergeant? Hayes was looking at me, waiting for orders. I made my decision. We hold position. Whatever's happening out there, running toward it in the dark and unfamiliar terrain is suicide. We maintain perimeter, weapons hot, and wait for daylight. Then, we investigate. But Staff Sergeant, those are my orders, Private Webb. He shut up, but I could see the anger in his face. The other soldiers looked torn between relief and shame. Rangers didn't hide while brothers were in danger, but Rangers also didn't run blindly into ambushes. I hoped I'd made the right call. The rest of that night was the longest of my life. We stayed on full alert, every soldier awake, weapons ready, listening to the darkness. At 0300, we heard movement in the trees around our perimeter, something large, circling us, staying just beyond the reach of our flashlights. What is that? Webb whispered, his rifle tracking the sound. Could be elk, Martinez said, but his voice lacked conviction. The movement continued for an hour, circling, probing, like whatever was out there was studying us, learning our positions, testing our responses. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. When dawn finally came at 6:15, we were exhausted, terrified, and ready to get the hell out of those woods. Pack up, I ordered. We're heading to Chalk 3's last known position. Combat spacing, weapons hot, expect contact, move out. We found them at 0745, or rather we found what was left of them. Chalk 3's camp was located in a natural depression surrounded by massive old-growth cedars. Tactical positioning was solid, High ground on 3 sides, good sight lines, defensible perimeter. Sergeant Tom Walsh had been the instructor for that chalk, and he'd been doing this job almost as long as I had. He would have chosen this position carefully, it hadn't mattered. The first thing I saw was gear scattered everywhere, rucksacks torn open, contents strewn across the forest floor, rifles lying in the dirt. No bodies visible, but the ground was dark with something that looked black in the dawn light. As we got closer, I realized it was blood. A lot of blood. "Spread out," I ordered quietly. "Weapons ready." Eyes open. My soldiers moved into the camp carefully, checking corners, scanning the tree line. The smell hit me as I reached the center of the camp. Copper and decay. The unmistakable stench of death. I'd smelled it before in combat zones, but somehow it was worse here in the peaceful morning forest. We found the first body 20 feet from the camp center, halfway up a nearby cedar tree. It was Private Second Class Danny Morrison, one of Walsh's younger soldiers. His body had been wedged into a fork in the branches about 15 feet up, positioned so he was facing down toward the camp. His eyes were open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. The amount of force required to throw a grown man that high into a tree. "Jesus Christ," Webb breathed behind me. "Keep it together, Private," I snapped, though I felt the same horror. "Hayes, document everything. Photos, notes, positions. Martinez, help me get him down." It took us 10 minutes to retrieve Morrison's body using climbing rope. The corpse was stiff with rigor mortis, meaning he'd been dead for at least 6 hours. The cause of death was obvious. Massive trauma to the chest and abdomen, ribs crushed inward like something incredibly strong had simply squeezed the life out of him. We found the rest of Chalk 3 over the next hour. Sergeant Walsh was at the northern edge of the perimeter, his rifle still in his hands, ammunition expended. He'd died fighting, but whatever he'd been shooting at hadn't been slowed down. His body showed the same massive trauma as Morrison's, crushed, broken, like he'd been hit by a truck. Specialist Amanda Pierce was found 50 yards from camp, in the middle of a stream. She'd been running, trying to escape, hadn't made it. The water around her body ran pink with diluted blood. Corporal James Chen was simply gone. We found his gear, his weapon, even his boots, neatly arranged in the center of camp like an offering. But no body, no blood trail, no sign of what had happened to him. Just his equipment, left behind like a calling card. That was 5 bodies accounted for. Chalk 3 had been 9 soldiers, 4 were missing. "Staff Sergeant," Martinez called from the western edge of camp. "You need to see this." He was standing at the base of a massive Douglas fir, pointing up. Carved into the bark about 8 feet up were symbols, not letters, not any language I recognized, but deliberate marks cut deep into the wood. They were fresh, sap still bleeding from the cuts. "Territory marker?" Hayes suggested. "More like a trophy," Martinez said grimly. "Like a hunter carving notches." I looked around the camp again, trying to piece together what had happened. The attack had come fast. Most of the soldiers hadn't even made it out of their sleeping bags. But Walsh and at least 2 others had fought back, expended ammunition, tried to defend the position. It hadn't helped. What kind of animal could do this? Bears were powerful, but they didn't coordinate attacks. Cougars were ambush predators, but they didn't hunt in packs. Wolves might pack hunt, but they couldn't throw a man 15 feet into a tree. "These aren't animal kills," Martinez said quietly, echoing my thoughts. "This was organized, systematic. They isolated the camp, took out the perimeter guards first, then closed in on the center. Military tactics. He was right, and that terrified me more than anything else. Whatever had done this understood squad tactics, understood how to neutralize a defensive position. It had studied human military behavior and adapted its hunting strategy accordingly. My radio crackled to life, making us all jump. 1. Chalk. Do you... Static swallowed the transmission. I keyed my mic. This is Chalk 1. Say again your last. Over. Morrison. Extraction. 3 hours. Creek. More static. Chalk 2. Is that you? Repeat your message. The radio went dead. I tried for 5 minutes to re-establish contact but got nothing. That brief transmission had told me 3 things. At least one other chalk was still operational. They'd found Morrison's chalk, or what was left of it, and they were trying to coordinate an extraction. But the details were lost in static. We need to move, I said, making a decision. Our original objective is compromised. New plan. We head southwest to the primary extraction LZ, rendezvous with any other survivors, and get the hell out of these woods. What about the missing soldiers? Webb asked. Chen and the others. I looked at the devastation around us, at Morrison's broken body laid out on the forest floor, at the symbols carved into the tree. Private. Whatever took them is long gone. Our priority now is getting the living out safely. We move in 30 minutes. Prep your gear. While the soldiers prepared to move, I did one more sweep of the camp. That's when I found Walsh's field notebook tucked into his jacket pocket. Rangers were trained to document everything. Locations, observations, anything unusual. I flipped it open to his last entry, dated yesterday, October 16th, 21:45 hours. Day 2, something wrong with these woods. No wildlife. Found structures made of branches, organized, deliberate, soldiers on edge. At 21:30, heard sounds from tree line, not animal. Sounded like speech, but not English. Not any language I recognize. Multiple voices, coordinating. Chen saw something at 2140, tall figure, maybe 8 feet, moving through trees. Too dark to ID. Advised Chalk to stay alert. Going to Condition 1. If anyone finds this... The entry ended there, mid-sentence. I pocketed the notebook. We abandoned Chalk 3's camp at 09:15 hours and moved southwest at combat pace. The extraction LZ was approximately 20 miles away. A logging road clearing where helicopters could land. If we maintained speed, we could be there by tomorrow afternoon. But as we moved through the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Studied. Followed. At 1300 hours, we stopped for a brief rest and water refill at a small creek. That's when I noticed the tracks. They were in the soft mud at the creek's edge, footprints, but wrong. Too large, maybe 14 inches long and 7 inches wide. 5 toes, but the proportions were off, the arch too deep, the big toe set at an angle that looked almost opposable. Whatever had made these tracks walked upright, but it wasn't human. Martinez saw them too. Sasquatch prints, he said, his voice flat. That's what they look like the photos you see on those cryptozoology websites. Specialist, I don't want to hear conspiracy theories. Staff Sergeant, I'm not talking conspiracy, I'm telling you what I see. These tracks are real. They're recent. Made within the last hour. And look. He pointed downstream. There are more. A lot more. Different sizes. He was right. Following the creek bank, I could see dozens of tracks. Different sizes suggested different individuals. A group, a pack, a hunting party. How many? I asked. Martinez studied the tracks carefully. At least 7, maybe more. They're overlapping. Hard to get an accurate count. He looked up at me. Staff Sergeant, whatever killed Chalk 3, it wasn't working alone. This is a coordinated group. And based on these tracks, I'd say they weigh between 400 and 600 pounds each. 600 pounds. Strong enough to throw a man into a tree. Large enough to crush a human chest with bare hands, and there were at least 7 of them. "We need to move," I said. "Now. Double time to the LZ. No stops except for water. Move." We pushed hard for the next 4 hours, maintaining a punishing pace. The soldiers were exhausted, but fear is an excellent motivator. Every soldier in my chalk had seen what happened to Chalk 3. Nobody wanted to be next. At 17:30 hours, as the sun was beginning to set, and I was considering whether to push through the night or make camp, we heard it. The wood knocking sound, like the night before. But this time it wasn't distant. It was close, maybe 100 yards away on 3 sides. 3 distinct locations, 3 distinct sources. Knock, 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 pause, knock, knock, knock. They were communicating, and they had us surrounded. "Defensive circle," I ordered. "Back to back, weapons out." My 8 soldiers formed a tight circle, facing outward, rifles raised. We stood there in the gathering darkness, listening to those knocks echo through the forest. The sound moved, circling us, always staying just beyond visual range. Then, as the sun finally set and the forest plunged into darkness, the knocking stopped, and the screaming started. It came from everywhere at once, high-pitched, piercing shrieks that sounded almost human but weren't, mixed with lower bellowing sounds that resonated in my chest cavity. The soldiers were shouting, trying to call out contacts, but there was nothing to see, just darkness and noise, overwhelming noise designed to disorient and terrify. "Night vision," I shouted. "Everyone on nods now." We fumbled for our night vision goggles, pulling them down over our eyes. The forest turned green and grainy, shadows resolving into trees and undergrowth. But still no targets. The screaming continued, moving around us, sometimes distant, sometimes terrifyingly close. "There!" Webb screamed, pointing northeast. "I saw something!" Large, moving fast. I swung my rifle toward where he was pointing but saw nothing. Whatever it was had already moved. "Calm down," I ordered. "Controlled breathing. Pick your sectors, watch for movement. Do not fire unless you have a clear target." The screaming stopped as abruptly as it had started. The silence was worse. Through my night vision I could see my soldiers' faces, wide-eyed, terrified, fingers white on their rifles. We stood there in that defensive circle for 20 minutes, listening to nothing but our own breathing and the pounding of our hearts. Then Martinez whispered, "Staff Sergeant." 3 o'clock, 30 meters, in the trees. I looked where he indicated and felt my blood freeze. There was something in the trees, watching us. Through the night vision, I could see a shape, large, maybe 7 feet tall, standing completely still behind a cedar trunk. The thermal signature was wrong for any animal I knew. It was there, watching us, studying us. "I see it," I whispered back. "Nobody fires. It might leave if we don't aggress." We stood there in a silent standoff, 8 soldiers with weapons and training, facing something that shouldn't exist. Through my night vision, I watched that shape. It didn't move, didn't attack, just watched. Then I saw another shape, off to our left, and another to our right. They'd positioned themselves in a triangle around us, covering all angles. This wasn't mindless animal behavior. This was tactical positioning. "Multiple contacts," I said quietly. "At least 3. They're flanking us." "What do we do?" Hayes asked, her voice shaking. Before I could answer, the one in front of us moved. It stepped out from behind the tree, fully visible now in the green glow of night vision. 8 feet tall easily, maybe more, covered in dark hair or fur, shoulders impossibly broad. Its arms hung almost to its knees, and its face, I could see its face. Flat, almost human features but larger, more primitive, and eyes that gleamed with intelligence. It raised one massive hand and made a gesture, a sweeping motion, unmistakable in its meaning. Leave. Back up, I ordered quietly. Slow, controlled movement. Maintain defensive formation. We're leaving their territory. We backed away, step by careful step, weapons still raised. The creatures didn't follow. They just watched as we retreated, making sure we understood the message. This was their forest. We were the intruders, and they were allowing us to leave. We'd backed up maybe 50 yards when Martinez stumbled over a root and went down. 3 of us grabbed him, hauling him back up. In that moment of distraction, of broken formation, they moved. The one on our left rushed forward with impossible speed, not running, but moving in long, loping strides that covered ground faster than any human could sprint. It grabbed Martinez before anyone could react, one massive hand closing around his chest, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. Martinez screamed. We opened fire, muzzle flashes strobing in the darkness, the crack of M4 rifles deafening in the night forest. I saw rounds impact the creature's torso, saw it flinch, heard it roar in pain or rage, but it didn't let go of Martinez. It turned and ran, carrying Martinez with it, disappearing into the forest so fast it was like it had simply vanished. The other creatures followed, melting into the darkness. Gone. We stood there in shocked silence, ears ringing from the gunfire, staring at the spot where Martinez had been just seconds ago. Someone was crying. Maybe it was Webb. Maybe it was me. I don't know. Fall back, I said, my voice hoarse. Combat pace. We need to put distance between us and this location. Move! We ran. For the first time in my military career, I ordered a full retreat, and we ran through the darkness like terrified children fleeing the monster under the bed. Because that's what we were. We'd encountered something that violated everything we thought we knew about reality, and we were utterly outmatched. We ran for 30 minutes before I called a halt, my soldiers collapsing in exhaustion, several of them sobbing openly. I let them cry. They'd earned it. We all had. As I sat there in the darkness, listening to my soldiers break down, I realized something that should have been obvious from the start. We weren't on a training exercise anymore. We were in a combat zone, and we were losing. The enemy was faster, stronger, smarter. They knew this terrain better than we ever could. They had superior numbers, superior tactics, and they understood us better than we understood them. The Ranger Creed says to fight on even if you're the lone survivor. But what do you do when the enemy isn't something you can fight? When your training, your weapons, your entire worldview isn't adequate for the threat you're facing? I didn't know, but I was going to have to figure it out because we still had 20 miles to go, and those things knew exactly where we were. The hunt wasn't over. It had barely begun. We didn't stop moving until 0200 hours. 7 soldiers, exhausted, terrified, stumbling through the darkness with night vision goggles that seemed increasingly useless. Every tree could hide one of those things. Every shadow could be death. I'd lost 2 soldiers, Morrison and Martinez, both gone, taken by something that shouldn't exist. The rational part of my brain kept trying to find explanations. Rogue bears, feral humans, mass hallucination from contaminated water. But I'd seen it, we'd all seen it. 8 feet tall, intelligent, coordinated, using military tactics to hunt us. At 0215, I finally called a halt in a small depression between 2 massive cedar trees. The soldiers collapsed immediately, too exhausted even to set up proper security. "Listen up," I said, my voice hoarse from the adrenaline and fear. "I know you're scared, I'm scared too, but we can't panic. We have 17 miles to the extraction point. If we maintain pace, we can be there by tomorrow afternoon. The helicopters will pull us out, and this nightmare ends. But we need to stay together, stay alert, and keep moving. Understood? Nods, but I could see they were broken. Webb was shaking uncontrollably despite the mild temperature. Hayes had tears streaming down her face. Corporal Davis was rocking back and forth, muttering prayers under his breath. These weren't soldiers anymore. They were survivors hanging on by their fingernails. 2-hour rest, I said. Then we move. I'll take first watch. I sat at the edge of our tiny perimeter, rifle across my lap, trying to process what had happened. Martinez was a good soldier, a good man. We'd served together for 2 years, shared beers, talked about his family back in New Mexico. And now he was gone, taken by something out of a nightmare. Why had they taken him alive? That question kept circling in my mind. The others from Chalk 3 were killed on sight, left where they fell. But Martinez had been carried off, captured. That suggested intelligence, purpose. They wanted something from him, or they wanted us to know they could take our people whenever they chose. The psychological warfare aspect wasn't lost on me. They were breaking us down, destroying our morale, turning trained soldiers into frightened animals. And it was working. At 0400 hours, as I was about to wake my relief, I heard something that made my heart leap. A radio transmission, faint but clear. Anyone, Chalk 2, position Comprom, southeast, Old Ranger Station. I grabbed my radio. Chalk 2, this is Chalk 1, I copy your transmission. What's your status? Over ! Static, then. Chalk 1, Morrison, 3 of us left, creatures everywhere, need help. Morrison. That was Patricia Morrison, the instructor for Chalk 2. 3 left out of her original 9, same attrition rate as us. Chalk 2, what's your current location? Over ! Old Ranger Station, mile marker 7 on the... The transmission cut out. Mile marker 7. I knew that location. An abandoned Forest Service station about 8 miles southeast of our position. Built in the 1960s, decommissioned in the 90s, but the structure should still be standing. It would provide shelter, defensible walls, a place to make a stand. Everyone up, I said, shaking my soldiers awake. We have friendly forces in contact. We're moving to link up and extract together. Pack your gear. We leave in 5 minutes. The promise of reinforcements, of not being alone anymore, galvanized my Chalk. They moved with more energy than I'd seen since the first day, desperate for the safety of numbers. We reached the ranger station at 0730 hours, as the sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky. The building was a small, single-story structure built from logs and stone, designed to weather decades of Pacific Northwest storms. The windows were boarded up, the door hanging half open. Chalk 2. This is Chalk 1, I radioed as we approached. We're at your location. Coming in from the northwest. Don't shoot us. No response. We entered tactically, weapons raised, clearing each room. The station was empty except for old furniture and decades of dust. No sign of Morrison or her survivors. They were here, Hayes said, pointing at the floor. Fresh boot prints in the dust. Recently disturbed equipment, MRE wrappers. But they're gone now. We found Morrison's radio in the back room, still turned on, broadcasting static. Next to it was a message scratched into the wall with a knife. They took Chen. Don't stay here, they know. Chen. That was Corporal Chen from Chalk 3, the one we'd assumed was dead. He was alive. Or had been when Morrison wrote this message. They'd taken him too, just like Martinez. Capturing, not killing. What does it mean? Webb asked. Why are they taking prisoners? Before I could answer, I heard it. The wood knocking sound. Close now, coming from 3 directions around the station. They'd followed us here. Or maybe they'd herded us here, to this isolated building with no escape routes. Barricade the doors, I ordered. Windows too. We're making a stand. If they want us, they're going to have to come through walls. We worked frantically, piling furniture against the doors, nailing boards across the windows using tools we found in the station's old storage. It took 30 minutes to secure the building. Not perfect, but better than being in the open. The knocking continued the entire time, circling the building, those 3 distinct sources maintaining a triangular pattern around us. Communication. Coordination. They were letting us know they had us surrounded. As we finished the last barricade, the knocking stopped. The silence was immediate and total. No birds, no wind, nothing but our own breathing and the creaking of old wood settling. They're coming, Martinez had said before he was taken. He'd been right. We waited in that silence for 20 minutes, weapons pointed at doors and windows, every soldier wound tight as a spring. Then we heard a sound that froze my blood. Laughter. Not human laughter, but something close enough to be recognizable. It came from right outside the northern wall, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the building's structure. They were mocking us, showing us they understood our fear, our desperation, demonstrating their superiority. Then the siege began. It started with rocks, not thrown at random, but targeted. They hit specific points on the walls, testing structural integrity. Boom, boom, boom. Methodical, scientific. After each impact, there would be silence, as if they were listening to how the building responded, learning its weaknesses. They're probing our defenses, I said, recognizing the tactic. It's what military engineers do before assaulting a fortified position. Learn the structure, find the weak points, then exploit them. The rock throwing continued for an hour, gradually intensifying. Some of the impacts were so powerful they cracked the log walls, sending splinters flying into the room. Whatever was throwing these rocks had incredible strength. Then they tried a new approach. They started pulling at the roof. We heard it clearly, the sound of something massive on the roof above us, tearing at the shingles, ripping away boards. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. They were trying to open us up like a can of sardines. Suppressing fire through the ceiling, I ordered. Drive them off. We fired upward, punching holes through the old roof, hoping the bullets would discourage them. For a moment it worked. We heard something retreat, heard that same, not quite human roar of pain or anger. But within minutes they were back. Now, working on multiple points of the roof simultaneously. How many were up there? 4? More? We can't stay here, Hayes said, voicing what we all knew. They're going to tear this building apart around us. She was right. The station was a trap, not a fortress. But going outside meant facing them in the open, and we'd seen how that worked out. I made a decision I still regret. We used the hostages as leverage. What? Webb looked at me like I'd lost my mind. They're taking our people alive. Martinez, Chen, probably others from Morrison's Chalk. They're somewhere close, being held. That means our captors value them for something. We make noise, draw attention, force them to respond. While they're distracted, some of us break for the extraction LZ. That's suicide, Davis said. Whoever stays behind dies buying time for the others to escape, I finished. I know. That's why I'm staying. The rest of you make for the LZ. Move fast, don't stop, don't look back. When you reach extraction, tell them what happened here. Make sure our story gets out. "Staff Sergeant, we're not leaving you." "That's an order, Private Webb." I stood up, using every ounce of command presence I'd developed over 15 years. "You will follow orders. You will survive. You will tell people what happened here. That's the mission now. Understand?" Slowly, reluctantly, they nodded. We spent the next hour preparing. I would stay behind with enough ammunition to make a lot of noise. The others would wait for my signal, then break out the back and run. Simple plan, probably suicidal, but it was all we had. At 1100 hours, as the sun reached its zenith and the creatures seemed to have temporarily withdrawn, they didn't like full daylight, I'd noticed, we made our move. I positioned myself at the front door, rifle at the ready. The other 6 soldiers gathered at the back, preparing to run. We'd removed the barricades, cleared a path. On my signal, they would bolt. "Remember," I said, looking at their faces, memorizing them. "Get to extraction. Tell the story. Make sure people know what's out here." "Staff Sergeant," Hayes said, tears in her eyes, "it's been an honor." "The honor was mine, Corporal. Now get ready to move." I counted down from 3, then kicked open the front door and opened fire. I didn't aim at anything specific, just fired in short bursts into the forest, making as much noise as possible. The creatures responded immediately, their roars echoing from multiple directions, converging on my position. I heard my soldiers break from the back, heard them running, crashing through undergrowth. I kept firing, backing into the station, drawing the creatures toward me and away from the escaping soldiers. Through the doorway, I caught glimpses of massive shapes moving through the trees, advancing on the building. I'd gotten their attention. Then something massive hit the front wall, and the entire structure shook. They were done being subtle. Now they were going to tear the place down with me inside. I retreated to the back room, still firing, watching through the doorway as the front wall began to buckle. A massive, furred arm punched through the logs, grabbing at the air, searching for me. I put 3 rounds into it, heard that roar again, saw the arm withdraw. The building was coming apart. I had maybe 2 minutes before they breached completely. I'd done my job, bought my soldiers time to escape. Now I just had to accept what came next. I sat down with my back against the wall, facing the disintegrating front of the station, rifle across my lap. If I was going to die, I'd do it like a ranger. Fighting, defiant, unbroken. The front wall collapsed inward with a sound like thunder. I raised my rifle, and then I heard the helicopters. The extraction birds weren't supposed to come until tomorrow, but someone, Webb, maybe, or one of the others, had gotten through on the radio, had called for emergency extraction, had brought the cavalry. 2 Blackhawks came in fast and low, their rotors hammering the air. Door gunners already firing into the forest around the station. I heard the creatures scatter, heard their retreat, heard them abandoning their siege in the face of overwhelming firepower. A rope dropped through the destroyed roof. A crew chief's face appeared above me, shouting over the rotor noise, "Grab on! We're getting you out!" I grabbed the rope and was hauled up, through the remains of the roof, into the helicopter's cargo bay. The crew chief was already pulling up, gaining altitude, the forest dropping away below us. Through the door, I could see them, dozens of them, massive figures retreating into the deep forest, moving with that same loping gait, too many to count. They'd been hunting us with just a fraction of their numbers. If they'd wanted to, they could have overwhelmed us at any time. The helicopter banked hard, heading west, leaving Olympic National Forest behind. I slumped against the bulkhead, exhausted, traumatized, alive. The crew chief handed me a headset. "Your people are aboard the other bird," he said. "All 6 of them made it to the LZ. You did good, Sergeant. 6. I'd started with 23. 6 had survived. As we flew toward Joint Base Lewis McChord, I looked back one last time at the forest. From this altitude, it looked peaceful, pristine, beautiful. You'd never know what lived in those trees, what hunted there, what waited for the next group of humans to wander into their territory. But I knew, and I would spend the rest of my life trying to forget. The debriefing began the moment we landed at Joint Base Lewis McChord. Before we'd even cleared the landing pad, we were separated. Each survivor taken to a different building, different interrogation room, isolated from each other. Standard procedure for classified incidents, they told us. But I knew what this really was. Containment protocol. They were making sure our stories aligned before any information leaked. I was taken to Building 7, a nondescript structure on the edge of the base that I'd never noticed before. The room they put me in was sterile, windowless, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly unreal. A camera in the corner recorded everything. A microphone on the table picked up every word. They left me there for 3 hours before anyone came in. When the door finally opened, it wasn't a military officer who entered. It was a man in his late 50s, wearing civilian clothes, dark suit, no tie, the kind of bland professional appearance that screamed federal government. He carried a thick folder and a digital recorder. "Staff Sergeant Reynolds," he said, sitting down across from me without offering his name. "I'm here to debrief you regarding the training incident in Olympic National Forest. For the record, this conversation is classified top secret. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, my voice hoarse from screaming orders and breathing smoke during the station siege. "Good. Tell me everything that happened from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." I told him, all of it. The missing wildlife, the torn deer carcass, the symbols on the trees, Chalk 3's massacre, the tracks, the 8-foot creatures using military tactics, Martinez being taken, the siege at the ranger station. I didn't embellish, didn't speculate, just reported the facts as I'd observed them. He listened without interruption, his face betraying no emotion. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Staff Sergeant, you and your soldiers experienced a traumatic event. 17 fatalities, multiple injuries, extreme stress. The human mind under such conditions can perceive things that aren't there, create narratives to explain inexplicable events. I'd been expecting this. So you're saying we hallucinated everything? All of us simultaneously, the exact same hallucinations? I'm saying that there are no such things as 8-foot-tall, intelligent primates in Olympic National Forest. What you encountered was most likely a combination of factors. Aggressive black bears, possibly rabid, attacking in unusual coordination due to environmental stressors. Coupled with low visibility, exhaustion, and fear, your perceptions, we found 14-inch footprints, I interrupted. Multiple sizes, different individuals. We saw them tear apart a reinforced log building. We watched them use coordinated military tactics. This wasn't bears. The man's expression hardened. "Staff Sergeant, I'm going to be very clear with you. The official report will state that your training exercise encountered a group of aggressive black bears. Due to inadequate preparation and poor decision-making, 17 soldiers were killed. This tragedy will be used to improve future training protocols. That is the story, that is the only story. And if I tell a different story, then you will be dishonorably discharged, stripped of your pension, and potentially charged with violations of the Espionage Act for revealing classified information. Your surviving soldiers will face the same consequences, and none of it will matter, because no one will believe you anyway." He pulled out several documents from his folder and slid them across the table. These are non-disclosure agreements. You will sign them. You will not discuss what happened in Olympic National Forest with anyone. Not media, not family, not other soldiers. The incident is classified. It doesn't exist. Do you understand? I stared at the documents, feeling a familiar rage building. I'd lost 17 soldiers. Good men and women who'd trusted me to lead them safely. And now this bureaucrat was telling me to pretend it didn't happen? To let their deaths be classified as training accident and forgotten? But I also understood the bigger picture. If I refused, if I went public, they'd destroy me, and my story would be dismissed as the ravings of a mentally unstable veteran. The truth would die with my credibility. I signed the documents. "Smart choice," the man said, collecting the papers. "You'll be reassigned to administrative duties at Fort Benning, effective immediately. Your surviving soldiers will be spread across different bases. Consider this a gift, Staff Sergeant. You get to keep your career, your pension, your life. Most people who see what you saw don't get that option." "Most people?" I asked. "You're saying this has happened before." He stood up, gathering his materials. "This conversation is over. A car will take you to temporary barracks. You'll fly out to Fort Benning tomorrow. Your personal effects will be shipped. Don't try to contact your soldiers. Don't try to investigate further. Just go to Georgia, serve out your time, and forget Olympic National Forest." He left without another word. I spent the next 6 years at Fort Benning, teaching basic combat training to new recruits. Good work, important work, but it felt hollow. Every night, I dreamed about those woods, about Martinez being dragged into darkness, about Chalk 3's bodies scattered like broken dolls, about those intelligent eyes staring at me through night vision, studying me, learning me. I tried to follow orders, tried to forget. But you can't forget something like that. It becomes part of you, changes the way you see the world. In 2007, I retired from the Army at the rank of Master Sergeant, took my pension, bought a small house in Georgia, tried to build a normal civilian life, got married, had kids, coached Little League. On the surface, I was fine. Underneath, I was still in those woods, still being hunted. I never contacted my surviving soldiers. The NDAs were clear about that. But I followed their careers from a distance, checking public military records, looking for their names and transfers and promotions. Hayes made captain and served 2 tours in Iraq. Webb got out after 8 years and became a police officer in Oregon. Davis stayed in, made sergeant major, retired in 2015. None of them ever talked publicly about Olympic National Forest. The Army's conditioning held, but I kept researching. I couldn't help myself. I started looking into missing person cases in Olympic National Forest, using public records and Freedom of Information Act requests to find data the government couldn't classify. What I found disturbed me more than anything we'd experienced in the woods. Between 1980 and 2001, there were 63 documented disappearances in Olympic National Forest. Not all at once, but steadily, consistently. Hikers, hunters, campers, people who walked into those woods and never came out. In most cases, no bodies were ever recovered. No evidence was found. They simply vanished. The pattern was consistent with what we'd experienced. Isolated individuals or small groups, taken in areas with no witnesses, often in bad weather or low visibility. The official explanations varied: lost, injured, animal attacks. But reading between the lines, I could see the truth. Those people hadn't gotten lost. They'd been taken. And it wasn't just Olympic National Forest. I found similar patterns in national forests across the Pacific Northwest: Mount Rainier, North Cascades, Gifford-Pinchot. Clusters of disappearances, always in remote areas, always without resolution. Someone had coined a term for it: Missing 411. A researcher named David Paulides had been documenting these cases, writing books about the unexplained patterns. I bought his books, read them cover to cover, and felt a chill of recognition. Everything he described matched what we'd experienced. The intelligence, the systematic targeting, the lack of evidence, the impossible physical feats, the way bodies, when found, showed trauma consistent with massive force, the way some victims were never found at all, as if they'd been removed from our world entirely. Paulides was asking the same question I'd been asking for years. What's taking these people? He didn't know, but I did. I'd seen them, fought them, barely survived them. In 2015, something happened that broke my silence. Not publicly. I was still too afraid of the government backlash. But privately, with people who might understand. I was at a veterans support group in Atlanta, listening to other soldiers talk about their PTSD, their struggles readjusting to civilian life. Most of them had seen combat in Iraq or Afghanistan. Normal war, if such a thing exists. Their traumas were comprehensible, their enemies human. Then a younger soldier spoke up, a ranger from 3rd Battalion, just back from a training rotation. Weirdest thing happened, he said. We were running an exercise in Gifford-Pinchot Forest in Washington. Had to abort on day 2 because... He paused, looking uncomfortable. Because we kept finding these structures. Built from branches and rocks, arranged in patterns. And at night we heard sounds, not animal sounds, more like communication, knocking sounds moving around our perimeter. My blood went cold. Command pulled us out, the soldier continued. Said there was a safety concern, equipment malfunction. But I talked to some of the instructors later, and they said the same thing happened in the 90s. Training exercises getting shut down because of anomalous wildlife activity. That's what they called it. Anomalous. After the meeting, I approached him. That exercise in Gifford-Pinchot, I said quietly. Did anyone go missing? He looked at me sharply. How did you... He stopped, studying my face. You were there, weren't you? In 2001, Olympic National Forest, the one they classified. I can't talk about it, I said, NDAS, but I can tell you this. If they send you back into those woods, refuse, take the Article 15, take the discharge, whatever. Don't go back. It's that bad? Worse than you can imagine. And they're still there. They've always been there. We talked for 2 hours that night, comparing experiences, sharing observations. He'd encountered the same things we had. The markers, the sounds, the sense of being watched and studied. His unit hadn't made contact. They'd been extracted before it got that far. But he'd seen the tracks, the signs. He knew something was out there. Before we parted, he asked me the question I'd been asking myself for 14 years. What are they? I don't know, I admitted. Something old. Something that was here before us. Something that's learned to hunt us. And the government knows? The government has always known. Why do you think certain areas of national forests are restricted? Why do you think some training exercises get canceled for safety reasons? They know. They've been managing this for decades, maybe longer. Keeping it quiet, covering up the disappearances, classifying everything. Jesus, he whispered. How many people have they taken? Hundreds. Maybe thousands if you go back far enough. And it's not stopping. It's never going to stop because we can't stop them. We're not the apex predators we think we are. Not in those woods. I'm 63 years old now, writing this in 2024. 23 years have passed since Olympic National Forest. 23 years of nightmares, survivor's guilt, and watching the news for reports of disappearances in the Pacific Northwest. The NDAs I signed are still technically in effect, But I've reached the point in my life where I don't care anymore. What are they going to do? Strip my pension? I've already lived with the worst they could do to me, forcing me to stay silent while people keep disappearing into those woods. So I'm breaking my silence. Not with proof. I don't have any. The government made sure of that. But with testimony, with warning, with the truth as I experienced it. Last month, I saw a news report about a group of hikers who went missing in Olympic National Forest. 5 people, experienced outdoorsmen, well-equipped. They were found 3 days later, 4 miles from where they disappeared, with no memory of what happened. One of them died in the hospital from injuries consistent with massive, blunt force trauma. The official explanation was a bear attack. I knew better. I tried to contact the survivors through the hospital to warn them, to tell them what they'd really encountered, but they'd already been visited by men in suits, already signed documents, already agreed to the official story. The conditioning had begun. They'd lived the rest of their lives with nightmares they couldn't explain and questions they weren't allowed to ask. Just like I have. In my research over the years, I've identified certain patterns that might help people avoid becoming another missing 411 statistic. I share them now, knowing that most people will dismiss this as the ravings of a PTSD-addled veteran. But if even one person takes this seriously and saves their life, it's worth the ridicule. First, if you're in a national forest and notice the complete absence of wildlife, no birds, no squirrels, no insects, leave immediately. That silence means something is hunting in the area, and all the natural prey knows to hide or flee. Second, if you find structures built from branches and rocks, arranged in deliberate patterns, do not investigate. Do not photograph them. Mark their location and retreat. Those are territorial markers, and you've just entered a hunting ground. Third, if you hear wood knocking sounds, especially at night, especially in a pattern that sounds communicative, get to the nearest road or populated area as fast as possible. Those sounds are coordination signals for hunting parties. Fourth, never camp alone in remote areas of Olympic, Rainier, or North Cascades national forests. The creatures seem to target isolated individuals or small groups. Large groups with lots of noise and activity are generally left alone. It's not worth the risk to their secrecy. Fifth, if you see one of them, do not run. Do not attack. Back away slowly, maintaining eye contact, showing respect for their territory. They're intelligent enough to understand submission and retreat. They'll usually let you leave if you acknowledge their dominance. Sixth, if you're taken, fight for the first 30 seconds with everything you have. That's your window. After that, they'll have you secured and escape becomes nearly impossible. Go for the eyes, throat, any vulnerable area. Use any weapon available. Your goal isn't to win. It's to be more trouble than you're worth. Seventh, report everything to park rangers, even if you think you'll sound crazy. The more official reports exist, the harder it becomes for the government to maintain the cover-up. Document everything with photos and GPS coordinates. Back up your data in multiple locations. And most importantly, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong about an area, if your gut tells you to leave, listen. Your primitive brain can sense predators that your rational mind dismisses. We've evolved those instincts for a reason. I've tried to contact the other survivors over the years despite the NDAs. Webb never responded to my letters. Hayes told me through a lawyer to stop contacting her. Davis agreed to meet once, in 2012, at a bar in Tennessee. We didn't talk about Olympic National Forest directly. We were both still too afraid. But over beers he told me about his nightmares, about waking up in cold sweats, hearing wood-knocking sounds that weren't there, about avoiding camping trips with his family because he couldn't stand being in forests anymore. "Do you ever think about Martinez?" he asked, halfway through his 4th beer. Every day, I admitted. You think he's still alive? Out there somewhere? I'd asked myself that question thousands of times. Chen had been taken too, and Morrison's Chalk had reported seeing him alive days after his disappearance. What were they doing with the captives? Why take them alive instead of killing them on sight? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe they study us, learn from us, keep some alive to understand human behavior better. Jesus, Davis muttered. That's worse than killing them. That's like... He trailed off, unable to articulate the horror. Like cattle kept for observation, I finished for him. Yeah. We drank in silence after that. When we parted, Davis made me promise something. If anything happens to me, if I disappear or die under suspicious circumstances, you tell people. You tell them the truth, NDAs be damned. Deal? Deal, I agreed. Davis died in 2018. Heart attack, according to the official report. He was 49 years old, in good health, no family history of heart disease. The funeral was closed casket, which I found strange. I tried to investigate, but his military records had been sealed. Whatever happened to him, someone didn't want questions asked. I'm probably on a list now. Someone in the government is probably reading this as I type it, deciding what to do about a former ranger who can't keep his mouth shut. Maybe they'll discredit me, spread rumors about mental illness and PTSD. Maybe they'll make me disappear, just another tragic veteran suicide. I don't care anymore. I'm old, I'm tired, and I've carried this secret long enough. The truth is this. There are things in the forests of the Pacific Northwest that predate human civilization. Things that have learned to hide from us, to hunt us, to take our people when the opportunity presents. The government knows about them and has been covering up their existence for decades, maybe centuries. Why? I can only speculate. Maybe because acknowledging their existence would cause mass panic. Maybe because admitting the government can't control them would shatter the illusion of human dominance. Maybe because there are things being done with captured humans that would cause an uproar if revealed. Or maybe simply because the truth is too terrifying for most people to handle. We're not alone on this planet. We're not the apex species, and there are places where humans are still prey. The Olympic National Forest training exercises were permanently discontinued after 2001. The official reason given was environmental concerns. But I know the real reason. The Army lost too many soldiers and couldn't risk it happening again. They ceded that territory, acknowledged, privately, quietly, that those woods belong to something else. But civilians still go there. Thousands of people every year, hiking, camping, disappearing into the same woods that took my soldiers. And some of them never come out. Between 2001 and 2024, there have been 47 documented disappearances in Olympic National Forest. 47 people who walked into those trees and vanished. The numbers are similar in other Pacific Northwest forests. The pattern continues year after year, and the government continues to cover it up with explanations of lost hikers and wildlife attacks. How many more will be taken before someone in power has the courage to tell the truth? Last week I received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It showed a clearing in a forest, and in that clearing were structures, branch formations arranged in patterns I recognized immediately. On the back of the photo, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. They've moved south. Oregon now, more active than ever. Someone needs to warn people. I don't know who sent it. Maybe another survivor, another witness who can't stay silent anymore. Maybe someone in the government who's tired of the lies. Maybe even one of my soldiers from that day, finally ready to speak up. It doesn't matter. What matters is the message. They're still out there. they're still hunting, and they're expanding their territory. I'm publishing this account online, in multiple locations, with instructions for it to be spread if anything happens to me. I'm breaking every NDA I signed, violating every classification agreement. Let them come for me. Let them try to silence me. Because I've realized something after 23 years of silence. The real danger isn't these creatures in the woods. They're just predators doing what predators do. The real danger is the cover-up, the systematic suppression of information that prevents people from protecting themselves. Every person who disappears in those woods does so because the government chose secrecy over safety. Every family that loses someone and never gets answers is a victim of bureaucratic cowardice. Every soldier who dies in training exercises that shouldn't be happening is sacrificed to maintain a lie. I'm done being complicit in that lie. If you're reading this, and you're planning a trip to Olympic National Forest or Mount Rainier or North Cascades, I'm begging you, reconsider. If you must go, follow the rules I've outlined. Stay in groups, stay alert, trust your instincts. And if you see one of them, if you encounter something 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair, watching you with eyes that show intelligence and purpose, understand that you're not looking at an animal. You're looking at something that was here long before us, that knows these mountains better than any human ever will, and that sees you the same way we see deer, potential prey. The Ranger Creed says to complete the mission though you be the lone survivor. But sometimes the real mission isn't completing the objective, it's surviving to tell the truth. I survived Olympic National Forest. 17 of my soldiers didn't. And for 23 years, I've been forced to pretend their deaths were just a training accident, just bad luck, just one of those things that happens. No more. Their names were SSG, Thomas Walsh, PFC, Danny Morrison, SPC Amanda Pierce, CPL James Chen, SPC Tony Martinez, SPC Rachel Foster, CPL David Kim, PFC Sarah Johnson, SSG Patricia Morrison, SPC Miguel Santos, PFC Tyler Brown, CPR Jennifer Blake, SPC Marcus Webb, PFC Cameron Davis, SPC Lisa Hayes, CPL Robert Taylor, PFC Jessica Martinez. 17 soldiers who died fighting an enemy that officially doesn't exist. 17 families who were told their loved ones died in a bear attack. 17 names that deserve to be remembered for what really happened. This is my confession, my testimony, my warning. Believe it or don't. I don't care anymore. I've done what I should have done 23 years ago, told the truth. The Cascade Protocol, the government's classification for incidents involving these creatures in the Cascade Mountain Range, is still in effect. More training exercises have been canceled. More civilians have disappeared. More families are lied to. And somewhere in Olympic National Forest, in the deep, old-growth sections where humans rarely venture, they're still there. Still hunting. Still taking people. Still learning. We lost that forest in 2001. We lost it long before that, really. We just didn't know it. And if we're not careful, if we keep denying their existence, we'll lose more. More forests, more territory, more people. I'm 63 years old. I have maybe 20 years left if I'm lucky. I'll spend those years telling anyone who will listen about what's really in those woods. And when I die, maybe someone will continue the work. Maybe enough people will speak up that the truth can no longer be suppressed. Or maybe I'll just be dismissed as a crazy old veteran with PTSD, and nothing will change. Either way, I've done my duty. I've completed my mission. I've survived to tell the truth. The rest is up to you. If you're in the Pacific Northwest and you hear wood knocking sounds in the forest at night, remember this story. Remember 17 soldiers who went into Olympic National Forest and never came home. Remember that some territories don't belong to us. Some predators can't be defeated with weapons and training. And remember, the Cascade Protocol exists because the government knows what's out there. They've always known.